and I'm going to pick up the frame that I just dropped. We need this for demo in a sec. Okay. I also apologize for my camera. Maybe you put a sticker on your camera on your laptop. I do, and I think what it's done is made everything really glowy, but then we can't get really precise. So gonna look into somehow making a different camera work because it'll be better. If you have to leave early, of course, no problem. Take your cat to the vet, very important. Well, let's get started then. Hello, my beautiful budding bicycle mechanics. Welcome to the first of many classes to enrich and enhance your cycling lifestyle. Today's class is all about how to pack and rebuild your bike for safe travels. I'm Jenny Gwizdowski. I'm the director of the London Bike Kitchen, one half of the Wheel Suckers podcast, and also author of How to Build a Bike. There are some things in here that we'll be talking about today. So this book comes in handy when you need to take stuff apart and put some stuff back together. So we all wonder about how to pack your bike before you travel, but what about putting it back together and then repacking it for your return journey? So whether you choose a cardboard box, a hard case, or the clear bag method, there are key things that you must look after when packing and rebuilding your bike. So today we're going to learn about those things that will prevent damage while in transit, and also how to reassemble your bike with confidence. Before we get started though, there's just a bit of housekeeping. Be present, you're with me for the next hour. Turn your phone off. Make sure you've got a nice drink to keep your throat hydrated. Get some note-taking items and center yourself. You're here with me, and ask any questions at the end. And hopefully we'll have some time. As I was writing up the notes for today's class, I realized there's a lot of material to share. So it's good for you. So today's goals I've set are, we're going to talk about what tools and materials you're going to need, what parts must come off the bike, how we're going to protect stuff, or the really delicate things. And we'll talk about how to reassemble as well, and things to consider for your return journey. So sometimes people ride out, but they don't. They pack back, or they pack out and then they ride back. So before we go into vocab, though, I've got some quizzes to share with you. Oh, and if you've got anything you want to say to the group, make sure that in the chat you put, there's a little blue tab at the bottom. It says panelists, to panelists. Make sure it goes to panelists and attendees so everyone can hear or see your question as well. So I just put together a little silly poll. I'm curious, have you ever packed up a bike before? And are you dreaming of a cycling holiday? Because often we have to pack the bike to go somewhere, but also sometimes you have to pack the bike to move. So I'm just curious, like, where's your head at? So I can also tailor the talk for you. So it looks like 100% of precincts are reporting, and few of you have once or twice packed up a bike and few of you have never. So good, we're in the right spot. And are you dreaming of a cycling holiday? 3/4 of you are always, and one of you is like, maybe, but maybe you are. So me too, basically, me too. So in today's session, I won't be going over the different ways that you can pack the bike up. That's what the internet is for. So things like, are you going to use a box, or are you going to use a cling film? You will be the judge of that. But I'm going to be talking about how the there are specific things that have to be protected when you put your bike into someone else's hands. And I want to preface this session with you must practice. So you need to do a dry run at least once before your departure. Do this at least a week in advance. So you need to see if you're missing any tools, if there are any strange parts that won't come off, or if something's stuck, or if there's something particularly precious that needs protecting. The other thing you should do before you start packing is take pictures of everything you're taking off, so you remember what it looks like when you put it back together. Doesn't hurt your ego at all. There's no shame in this. Doesn't take any time. Just take a quick couple snaps, especially of the things we're going to be talking about today. I'm also going to be using some words that are a bit jargony, so I'm going to go into what those are now. So our vocab for today: righty-tighty or clockwise. This is when we're moving in, I like to say, the future. I'm going to grab the pointer. So righty-tighty is, if you imagine a clock face, I'm going clockwise into the future. Time is moving forward. Opposite of that is lefty-loosey. I'm turning to the left. I'm going counterclockwise. If you imagine a clock face, I'm going back in time. So this is just the way things are threaded. Generally, turning clockwise, turning to the right, means it's going to tighten, hence the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey phrase. Sometimes this isn't the case. We are dealing with pedals today, and that is one of the locations of the bike that has a reverse thread. I'll point that out when we get there. Next word is purchase. So this isn't to buy something. In the context of mechanics, something having purchase means that it fits. So what I'm really talking about here is you've got a tool. I know you guys can't really see me right now, but the tool fits into what it's fixing or turning, and it is secure. So if something is secure and it's fitting, then it has purchase. Very important. If you don't have purchase, for example, an Allen key going into an Allen bolt head, and it's not fitted properly and feels secure, and then you apply pressure to it, you will end up rounding out that hex shape. So the Allen shape is a hexagon, and if you put in the tools a bit crooked or it's not fully in, then the tool will end up rounding out all those flat sides of the hexagon. So rounding out is bad. You know what else is bad? Stripping threads. So this is the other thing we're going to have to really pay attention for in this session, because if you put in your pedals crooked, if you put in your derailleur crooked, you are going to end up stripping threads, and you're going to have a bad time, because that's it. You might strip your cranks. They can't be fixed. You're going to need new cranks. There are some kits out there, helicoil kits, where you can add new threads to stuff. We are not going over that today. It is better to avoid the problem in the first place and just do it right the first time. And we'll be talking about how to know you're putting in something straight. And lastly, this is my way of describing how tight we make something. Finger tight is like you're just twizzling your fingers. Hand tight is you're starting to turn your hand to get something tight. Elbow tight and shoulder tight are kind of similar in that you're now applying force using your entire arm. Shoulder tight is like you're starting to end with putting your shoulder into it. And then I usually end with gorilla tight, which is your entire body weight on top. Now, the caveat here, or the catch here, is that not everyone has the same amount of strength. Not everyone has the same weight. And that's where torque wrenches come into play, because torque wrenches are a standardized calibration of tightness. So I will be going over how to use a torque wrench today. I do recommend having one in your toolbox. It's actually quite a useful tool, especially if you've got carbon parts. So yeah, that's our vocab. Now we've got tools. So question is, what tools are you going to need? And the short answer is, well, what tools does your bike require? For example, there's no point in getting a pedal spanner if your pedals use a hex key. And so it's really important to go over your bike, get to know your bicycle, and know what tools you'll need for the parts you're going to remove. So some things you're not going to be removing, you don't need a tool for that. Don't worry about it. In general, though, you can't go wrong with, these are the things like you'll probably need to have a multi-tool. I hope that most people have a multi-tool at home because it is very useful. A pedal spanner. So again, if your pedals have to come off, just they have to. And we'll go over what will dictate whether or not you need a pedal spanner or a 6mm hex key. That's the other thing that you will need to have is a 6mm hex key. Many multi-tools have this on there already, which makes it a better choice for a pedal if it's got the option of taking off with a 6mm hex key. The next thing we'll need is some sort of padding material. This can be, this could be your clothing. So sorry, this is a cycle touring trick where if there isn't like a huge weight limit or a really low weight limit, you can use your clothing, your bags as padding to protect your bike. And you can protect the clothing from like the grease, or sorry, the oil on your chain by putting it in a plastic bag and then strapping it to your bike somehow. But you can equally use bubble wrap or foam, newspaper, plastic bags, any, get resourceful, use random soft padded things. If you're reusing it, bring an old pillow, that's quite useful. You'll also need some sort of tape. I like masking tape because it's easy to tear and it's generally strong enough. But you could use electrical tape as well, or something reusable, like a reusable cable tie or toe straps or a volley strap. So I actually find these volley straps to be really useful because not only can you use it to hold packing material onto your frame, but after you're done packing, this then becomes really useful for your journey. One of those things where it just comes in handy. A Sharpie. This is for marking your seat post height, very important. And some of these things are just nice to have. And I mean, this is for rebuilding your bike when you arrive. It's nice to have a pump. It's not necessary unless you've got tubeless. I would hope that maybe wherever you're going, there is a track pump there that you can use. It would be nice if you had a torque wrench, but not necessary for you to carry with you. It's more that you will need to get to know how much, for example, 5 Newton meters feels so that you don't over tighten and then strip your threads. Also, the torque wrench is kind of more essential if you've got carbon seat post or carbon fork steer tube, but we generally don't want to over tighten at all across the board. So over tightening is something to really watch out for. Stripping threads is sad. A spare mech hanger. I think depending on where you're going, it's a good idea to bring a spare mech hanger. Oh, I clicked on volley straps as well. So anyways, we talked about that. But a spare mech hanger is what your rear derailleur attaches to. This part can get damaged in transit quite easily. And so if you've got it, bring it with you. It's a good part to have. This here is by Problem Solvers. This is a universal mech hanger because mech hangers come in like 100 different shapes, and it's like a puzzle trying to find the right one for your bike. It's proprietary to your bike. So if you've got a specialized alley, there is a specialized alley mech hanger. There are aftermarket ones that you can use. This one in particular is good because you could not only help yourself, but you might be helping someone else, that if you're riding with them and something happens to their mech hanger. I'll be talking a bit more about the mech and the mech hanger later, but just wanted to touch on these items that are necessary to bring. I'm not going to be really these aren't really tools to carry with you while you're cycling. So that's like a whole nother class. There is some crossover here because of course you would want to bring a like multi-tool. But this is merely for reassembling and disassembling your bike. And also think of what you might need on your return journey. If you're riding the bike back home, no worries. I had the opposite issue. So my story here, I was doing my first solo tour from Hook of Holland to Bremen in Germany. And then I took a local train down to Munich where I didn't have to worry about packing my bike up. But my return journey was on a TGV and they were adamant about having the bike boxed up. So I cycled probably to 6 different bike shops until I found one that had a spare cardboard box. It took a day. And I was really lucky because I just happened to choose the day that they put out their recycling. And then when I got the box, it was a terrifying ride back to the Airbnb. It was like a sale. And very scary. So in hindsight, I would have contacted bike shops in advance to make sure that I could get a bike box. So again, don't just think about the way out, you need to think about your return as well. So regardless of what method you're using, there are things that must be taken off the bike. And these things are your pedals. Pedals have to come off. They will make things too wide to pack safely. Next up, your rear derailleur. The rear derailleur must come off. I've heard horror stories of people who were just a bit casual, left it on, the mech snapped, the mech gets bent, the mech hanger bends. Learn from other people's experiences and remove the mech, bundle it up in protective material, and then tape it to the frame. And then finally, wheels. And I put the S in parentheses because sometimes you can leave the rear wheel in or even the front, but it just depends on where you're putting, how you're packing the bike. If you have that much room to put both wheels in, often you'll have to take both wheels off. A lot of the specific bike packing boxes, you'll take the wheels off and they'll move to either side of the frame and they act like a protector for the frame as well. So those are the things that you must remove. Some things that you might remove, and that's in parentheses because you might just have to move your handlebars. So handlebars, you will either need to twist them to the side, but the fork will stay straight and the bars will twist, or you'll have to remove them completely and they'll get set onto the top tube of the bar and they'll hang there. Depending on how wide the box is, you might just have to twist the bars. But the bespoke bike ones, you'll often have to take them off completely. Another thing that you might have to take out is the seat post and saddle. Again, we're trying to get everything as compact and small as possible, so that seat post and saddle might be in the way. Sometimes you can just drop it down and slam it, but more likely you'll need to take the entire thing out. And you might have to take out wheels again. A note here, I stuck this in, on vintage seat bolts, These are this kind of fitment where you've got, and where's my pointer? It's called a keyed, it's a keyed nut. This piece here will slot into your frame, and it's an anti-rotation nut. And the side you're supposed to turn is this side. If you turned this side to undo your seat posts, you will end up tearing into your frame and rounding out the fitment for that keyed part. So I couldn't tell you, well, actually, generally the keyed part, you can see there's a key on this bolt here. This is much older tech, but this keyed part of the bolt, same thing, fits into the frame and does not move. You will not put a spanner on this side. You will put the spanner on this side. Same with this one. You are not going to move this side. You are going to move this side. Generally, the keyed bit is going to be on the left side or the non-drive side of the bike, and you're going to move the part on the drive side, the right side of the bike. When I say non-drive side and drive side, it's with my orientation. So I am sitting on the bicycle. To my right is the drive side. It's also the side with the chain. To my left is the non-drive side. How I would deal with this, though, is I would actually use 2 hex keys, 1 on each side. And if I didn't know which one had the keyed nut, anti-rotation nut, then I would undo them really carefully. And I'm testing, just checking to see which side actually moves. Very, very important. I've definitely seen people tear into their frames and strip them out because of this piece. So that's just a little note on anti-rotation washers. You will need to protect the fork, because we're going to take, if you take the wheel out, you have to protect the fork arms. You'll need to protect the rear dropout in the same way. The wheels come out. Now you've got these exposed fork arms or the rear dropouts, and if anything compresses the box, that means your stays are going to get smashed in, your fork arms are going to get smashed in. They're very delicate, so we're going to have to put something in there to protect them. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the other thing to protect is the disc brake caliper, and this is hydraulic only. Hydraulic disc brake calipers. If you take the wheel out, which means the disc comes out, and something knocks the bars, the brake lever, then the pistons are going to lock in and they won't return. So this isn't a cable actuated system. The cable's got a spring, it's going to spring back. But hydraulics use fluid, there is no spring, so the pistons lock in. You can open them back up. Again, it's adding to your workload if you have to do this. The best thing to do is avoid this from happening in the first place. So let's go through the process now of taking stuff off. Oh, right, I'm gonna stop sharing that. So I've got some things that Nelson sent me about packing tires. So I'm going to talk about stuff and then I'm going to do them and demonstrate. But the first thing I usually take off is pedals. Pedals have a reverse thread on the non-drive side of the bike, which means on the drive side, that's the right side, right hand side with the chain. When you're undoing the pedal, it's still righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. On the non-drive side, it's the opposite. So you'll be turning right or clockwise to loosen the pedal. This is not usual. This is atypical. So taking pedals off, I'm curious, has anyone taken pedals off before? Can you give me like do you do this show of hands, or like Annie's taken them off, BW's taken them off, David or Samantha? Yeah, you've taken them off. Okay, good. Samantha, maybe not. That's fine, because you gotta practice. And I would do this on the ground because pedals tighten as you ride, so they can be really difficult to get off. Like I just undid mine so that you won't see me struggling taking them off, but I did struggle. And you should definitely do this on the ground. So the bike's up off the ground right now because I need to show you, but do this on the ground. You need the earth to hold the bike and the pressure up against your pressure. So the thing to remember here is pedals loosen going back. So towards the back of the bike, and it's this direction. So that's another way to remember it. So if you're like, righty tighty lefts, I can't remember which direction that is. Just remember you're on the bicycle, pedals go back this way. I would say they will tighten going forward, and that's going this way. It's the same way that the wheels rotate when you go forward, right? So we're going to rotate the tool going towards the back of the bike. Oh, I've lost my notes. So on this drive side, it's regular threads. We're turning left or counterclockwise to loosen. Another way you imagine it's a clock face and you're going back in time. But then the other way, and I've thought of different ways of conveying this information, is you position the crank arm pointing forward and the tool going back. So I'm sorry I don't have the pedal spanner. It is in our house somewhere, but the house is a mess. And so it's, I'm going to use the 6mm hex key here to undo. So I just want to make sure this is in shot. Yeah, it's dark though, sorry. So the way you'd remember this, and you can do this on both sides of the bike, same concept, crank arm points forward. So the arm is pointing towards the front of the bike. And then if I had a pedal spanner, I'd position it here, and then it's pointing towards the back. And I put one hand on the pedal, one hand on the tool, and then I push down. If you're using a hex key, this tool is being put in the opposite side. So I'm going to put the hex on this side, not on the same side as the pedal. So because on the inside of the pedal, you'll see that there's a hex shape that this will fit into. Oh, that's not a 6, that's an 8. There you go. There's a discrepancy. It's a good thing we checked. So my pedals use a 6. These are Shimano, those were Speed Play. This is still going to move in the direction of going away from the front of the bike. We're going backwards. So like if you were moving the bike back, that's the wheel would turn this way. That is also the way you're still going to turn the hex key. So this is going to turn in that direction to come off. So watch your fingers here. It is really easy to, once that initial seal breaks, you know, you will flop and you could bash your knuckles into the chain rings. It's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of people. So be really careful. Think before you apply force and think, okay, if this drops and the position I'm in right now, I'm going to hit my head on the top tube. Maybe move a bit. I want to do a quick note on the shape of hex keys. So this type is called an L-shaped key, kind of obvious why. Obvious reason why. But there is a reason for this shape, and it is because if you notice on the long end, we've got a ball-shaped hex, right? It's still a hex, but it is round. And the reason why you have this is it's two reasons. One is, well, sorry. The reason for this length here is that you can twizzle it really easily. Twizzle things open and closed. But the reason for this ball end is that it means you can go in at an angle. So you don't have to use a 5, for example, on this derailleur. Like I'll still get traction even at, I'll still be able to turn this even if my Allen key is at an angle. And it's really meant to be used only in situations where you need to twizzle something quite quickly. This end is not to be used for the two situations when you are doing a final tighten or when you're trying to initially undo something. That is what the short end is for. So look what happens when I switch to the short end. I immediately get this really long handle that's really good for tightening and loosening and applying force. So we get the extra leverage and power with this handle in either loosening something that's really tight or tightening something up really securely. The size also dictates how tight you will go. So these tiny, you can see my set of hex keys here. I've got these tiny little 1.5, 2, 2.53, maybe up to 4, I would say. You're not applying a lot of force at all. It's just meant to be a little bit and then you're done. Whereas from 5 and 6, you're able to apply more force, right? This isn't going to bend under your weight. Maybe even 8. So 7 is only used on certain Unpack parts and you won't, in a set of Allen keys that you buy, metric, you will not find a 7. And you will not find 9 either. I don't think I've ever seen a 9 mil. And then 10 and up are like gorilla tight. That's your entire body weight going on something. But you can see the size of the Allen key is big. This can take it. This is meant to be using tons of force. So again, if you're tightening up a seat bolt, and often those are 4 mil, 4 mil is not going to be very much at all. So again, take into consideration the size of the tool that you're using, because that's going to tell you how tight something should be. So now I'm going to twizzle this pedal off because I want to show you that, I turned the wrong way. Goes backwards, goes towards the back of the bike. Silly me. See, you get so stuck in your ways. So that came off. And then again, with the non-drive side, this crank arm points forward, and then I'm going to put the tool pointing back. And again, turning towards the back of the bike. And I'm going to I'll switch now to the ball end, and then I can twizzle this. Twizzle that off. So that's why this shape of Allen key is very useful. So that was a reverse thread on the non-drive side of the bike. If you have pedals that only take a pedal spanner, which would be something like this, for example, you see there is no hex shaped hole there. There's just some weird divot. And it's got the 2 flat bits there for the pedal spanner. For ease of travel, I would recommend getting some pedals that will take a hex key, because this is much lighter to transport. It is more commonly found on multi-tools. And if you end up getting into a bind and needing to ask someone else for a tool, they're more likely to have the hex key than they are to have pedal spanners. So pedal spanners are specific to bikes. They're 15 millimeters in size, but they're thinner than regular spanners in order to be able to accommodate you've got this pedal in the way, right? You're trying to slide the tool in there. You've got the pedal there, and then you've got the crank right there. So that pedal spanner actually needs to be it's thinner, maybe half the width, but it is quite big because pedals tighten as you ride. So they are quite difficult to get off. So the pedal spanner is a big tool. So I recommend maybe hex key for your next pedal. Once your pedals are off, you can wrap them in some protective material and use a rubber band or masking tape to secure. I'm a really bad hoarder, and I get vindicated in these situations because I'll save something like this because I'm like, oh, that's really useful. And like for this, perfect for packing up like a pair of pedals, pop these in here. Done. Maybe a rubber band around that, and now that's packed up and ready to go. So if you're not a hoarder, but maybe your friend is, ask them. I'm sure they'll be happy to share packaging material. I know I would. I've got loads of it. So and this is another, like, these handy, like, popping plastic, I mean, but it's a bag. Really useful. So the next thing to take off is the rear mech. Again, has to come off. This uses a 5mm Allen key usually, but double check, of course. Taking off the rear mech is easy. This is, you just use the short end of the Allen key, so 5mm here, and lefty-loosey. But before you do that, you will need to move your shifter into the small sprocket here, because you want the mech to come all the way out from the bike. So I'm going to shift that down. Then I've got a couple different things here. My mech is mounted through this hole there onto the mech hanger, and a note on the position of the tool. Again, making sure you've got purchase. You know, you're not just like, I've seen a lot of people, they just do this and they just like Hail Mary it and like, it's gonna go in someday. No, it's got a certain shape. Make sure the shapes line up. We did this in kindergarten. You've got the little toy that has the square peg and you kind of put the square into the square shaped hole. Also a note on positioning of the tool. You will always have more power pushing down than pulling up, right? Because pushing down, again, you can use gravity, you can use your body weight, you've got all that weight going into the tool, as opposed to pulling up is like just my bicep, and that's like nothing. So I would not position the tool here to undo. I would position it here, because again, lefty-loosey, counterclockwise, we're going back in time. The wheel moves backwards that way, so we're going to loosen that direction, and then this should just come off because I did loosen it before. This is on a spring, so be careful when it pops off. And if you want to be extra gentle, you could even hold the mech while you're doing it to make sure it doesn't go haywire, or you catch it when it comes off the mech hanger. At this point, oh, you can see now it's come off the lip of the mech hanger, which a very important point when we put the mech back on. I can just twizzle that off. And then what I do here is wrap some bubble wrap around this and tape it to the frame. And that way the frame is protected, my mech is protected, and what you're preventing here is the mech from getting pushed in. And this could happen anywhere, really. Like, I'm sure people have experienced the sad news of, oh, your mech is bent. Like, this just happens. Like, the mech sits proud of the plane of the bike, and so it's a weak point. It can easily get knocked around. So one tip for just when you're locking a bike up somewhere where maybe there's a lot of people or a lot of bikes is shift your rear mech into the lowest gear. So the mech is closest to the bike, the center of the bike, and the biggest sprocket here. And then that is much less likely for anything to knock the rear mech or bend it. I've had this happen to me. It is to learn the hard way. So oh, the other thing to point out is on some mechs, the bolt is a bit hidden. This isn't a good example because the bolt is very, very clear here, but sometimes you can't see what the fitment is or what size it is. So just use a torch if you're not sure, and hopefully that will illuminate the issue. And again, making sure that the tool has purchase, it's fitting. It's the point where you don't want to round out, because then it's usually a new mech time. It's not the easiest part to replace because a lot of these they're pressed in. It's delicate. It's delicate. So the reason we are taking this off is to protect the mech, but also the mech hanger. So there's a small part on the bike that is actually not attached to the bike, or is not part of the frame until it is screwed on to the frame. This piece is very delicate. If you don't have a derailleur gear, if you have hub gear, single speed, don't have to worry about this. But many bikes have this mech hanger on it. And it's a innovation that's quite good, but also quite frustrating. But prior to this separate mech hanger piece, this was part of the frame. So you'd have the steel coming off, and then the threaded bit was where your mech would screw into. And then what would happen is, because it's dangling, because it's narrow, it would get knocked, and then the frame would have to get welded. Like, this happened to me. It's expensive to get that done. So the new system on most modern bikes has a separate mech hanger. It's a very brittle material. It is designed to break. It is a sacrificial part made to prolong the life of your mech and your frame. So because of this, it would be wise to carry a spare mech hanger on your travels, just in case, not even from the shipping of it, but it could happen on your ride. So these are proprietary to the frame. It's like fitting a puzzle piece. I showed you the one from Problem Solvers, but I recommend getting one of these anyways. They're just a useful part to have. So back to the bike. The other thing we'll need to take off, or alter rather, is your bars. So some setups, you might just have to move the bars to the side. And sometimes you do this in like a narrow hallway. And the fork steer and stem are the parts that are interacting here. And to undo this and to do it back up is a step-by-step process that cannot be altered. You must undo the bolts in the order that I am about to tell you now. This is going to be really important, even more important when we reassemble, and you'll do it in the opposite order. So let me have a sip. So a bit of an overview. We've got, this is a stem. The way you can tell, you see that there's a kind of a slight upward angle. Up or down is the plane for the stem. So it's not going to go like this where the stem is sideways. So you know that this piece is what clamps onto the fork steerer tube, and this is what clamps onto the handlebars. So this piece is very important in that if it is not fitted properly, you could have steering problems and come off your bike, or worse. So a bit of an overview of how it fits in here. So there's a headset, and that's the bearing system at the top and bottom of the head tube on your bike. And these are the bearings that allow you to steer. But they need tension in order to work properly. Not too tight, not too loose. If it's too tight, you won't be able to steer at all, or you get a really grinding sensation. Too loose, you'll get a knocking sensation that feels like the bars are not connected to the bike. So that the tension is being held into the correct, perfect 3-bearers place with a top cap bolt. So even if you have a carbon steerer, this bolt is playing a key role. Let's see if I've got my... So this is a fork here, and you'll see we've got the top of the fork steer tube. There is a top cap and a bolt that screws in there. So if we're only going to turn the bars, do not touch that top cap bolt. That stays on, that is holding the tension of all this in the correct place. The only thing you're going to loosen are these side bolts on the stem. Mine are a 4mm, many of them are 4mm, yours may be, but double check. And you're just going to loosen them slightly, again, lefty-loosey. And I've already undone these. Oops, wrong way. And it should get to the point where you can then just move the bars separately from the frame. And then you just turn that to the side and then pack the bike in, and that automatically narrows the bike somewhat. But sometimes it's not enough. So at that point, so again, I have not touched this top bolt. I've only touched the sides of the stem. So if I need to actually remove the stem and the handlebars, after I've undone the side stem bolts, then I will undo this top cap. So I'm going to do that now. So that's nice and loose. And that's nice and loose. And now the top, I think, is a 5. Yep. So different size. So 5mm. Again, taking note of what tools I will need to taking things apart are also tools that I will need to put them back together. So I undo this top bolt using the short part of my Allen key and then turn that. And this could very well drop out. So I'm going to start holding the front end here. Set those aside, remove spacers and top cap, and then I should be able to just pull that off. And now this can be put completely to the side. But if I let go, you can see the fork is coming out of the frame here. So what I'm going to do is put the spacers and the top cap and the stem back on for 2 reasons. One, it's going to keep my fork in the frame, and also it's going to keep these guys for safekeeping for later when I have to reassemble. So that's how you would take off an A head stem. You do have the quill stem old system. If there's time, I'll go over this in the end because I'm looking at the clock and I just realized it's almost 2. So this is going to be a long class. I'm just getting my place again. We've placed the spacers. With regards to seat post, you might have to slam the seat post down or take the whole thing out. But before you do anything, mark the seat post position with a Sharpie or wrap some tape around it so that it's easy to get your seat post at the right height. This is really important for those of you who have gotten a bike fit before, because you might want to make this a permanent mark. Be careful undoing the seat clamp. Again, you want to make sure the tool has purchase. You don't want to round out the bolt. It talks about the vintage seat bolts as well. Protecting your frame. This is where you can get creative. You can use the clothing that you're taking with you to protect your bike frame. Use bubble wrap, use foam tubing. The other thing you'll need to do now is securing stuff. So we talked about the dropouts. You'll need, if the wheel comes out, something needs to go back in to secure the position of the dropouts in your fork or rear end. And this will prevent the frame from bowing in and becoming damaged. You can use an old hub for this, but I suspect most people don't have an old hub laying around. Plus, they're heavy and will add weight. So a cheaper and lighter way is to use these frame spacers that come with brand new bikes. So any bike shop that sells new bikes, they're going to have loads of these because they're unpacking boxes and they just pull these out and they usually throw them into a pile or into the bin. So if you get in touch with them well in advance, ask them if they've got these plastic frame fork spacers, they'll probably give them to you for free. And if you've got a through axle, you just put the axle back in. You take the wheel out and thread the axle back in, and that is enough to protect your fork from getting bent. If you have hydraulic disc brake calipers, so we talked about preventing the pistons from locking in, you need to put something in between the pads to take up the gap that the disc once did. And so for that, again, your local bike shop that sells new bike parts will likely have these guys. So these are, don't know the official name, they're like disc brake pad spacer, but it's not the wide one. There's like two different kinds. You want the narrow one that will slide in, and they are specific to the brand of brake. So I think this super wide one is SRAM, and slightly like this one is Shimano. If you can't get these, that's okay, but just put in some clean cardboard, take a piece of cardboard, fold it in half so it applies some pressure, and have that take up the gap. Again, make sure it's clean. You need, I would clean these before I popped them in with rubbing alcohol, because I don't want my pads to get dirty in transit. If you have cable disc brakes, you don't need this. However, if you have the combination hydraulic and cable disc brake where it's a hydraulic caliper, I would use one of these as well. Note on tires, if you're flying and you have regular inner tubes, you should probably deflate tires a bit because air pressure does change as you go up and down, but there's no need to completely deflate. However, if you have tubeless, our friend Nelson has some words of advice. So this is what he sent over. Again, for air travel, you don't let much air out because, and for tubeless is really important. You're already running lower pressures than a tubed bike, so it's not a big issue. But the main thing for tubeless is you don't want the bead to unseat. So if you're already running like 80 psi, I think that's fine. Maybe go down to 70. Again, this is road tubeless. If you're mountain bike tubeless, it's fine because you're running like 20, no problem. Number two, you want to practice pumping with a hand pump. So if you've got tubeless and you're going to be traveling, you need to have a good hand pump. Good rims will seat a tire with a hand pump. You definitely want to practice this. If it doesn't go up and you're having issues, is there a compressor somewhere? Is there a bike shop nearby where you're going that can help pump up your tires? Or you could try CO2 cartridge. They are not the most environmentally friendly, but in this situation could be very useful. So again, practice though before you go. And the next thing that you should take with you is extra sealant. Take enough, take one of those little vials of sealant. You never know when you're going to need to top it up. And of course, if it all fails, bring a tube, because there's no shame in just saying, you know what, I'm not going to spend my time and energy on this. I just want to ride. Put a tube in it, you're good. And then some parts, he reckons bring a spare valve core, again, just in case. And you'll want to make sure that the valves are tight. Now, I'm not a tubeless pro, so some of these things I'm like, I vaguely understand this stuff. And his tip with the valves is that if you can find, here we have, this valve ring is a hex shape, which allows you to use a spanner to tighten it and make sure that it is definitely secure. I couldn't tell you where to find this particular valve ring. I remember we spotted it in the workshop and we thought it was very pretty. It is not common at all. Maybe someone is selling them out there, but I had not seen that before, and Nelson found a really good use for it in that it really helps with tubeless tire setup. So we're approaching 2. I understand that I said it was going to be an hour class. It's going to be a bit longer because we have to put, didn't mean to go here. We have to put everything back together. So, and I don't want to rush through this. So if you need to go, all good. I'll send the link to the video tomorrow and you can catch up with the rest of it. And if you like, you can post a question here if you have to go. And I'll answer it later. So at least it's in the chat when you watch it. So putting it back together is arguably more important than taking it apart, because there are some bits that could seriously go wrong if you don't pay attention or have an idea of what you're doing. So let's say bike's been in transit, you've just arrived, we're going to start putting this together. You take off all the packing materials. I'd put the wheels back in first, because that's going to give you stability for all the other things getting put together. And then I'd lean the bike against a wall, so you don't have to worry about holding it up. It doesn't really matter where you start, but I personally would kind of work backwards from how we took stuff off. So I would start by putting the bars back on first. So to do this, and it's a bit faffy doing this on the bike stand. We have to take the top cap and spacers off. And someday we'll have a second camera that will be a bit zoomed in and closer on this. But that is not today. And I remember that all my colored spacers are on top. And then I make sure that my fork is all the way in. You can feel that it's fitted. That goes on, top cap goes on, that spacer goes on. Make sure my cables are all in the right position, and then I just slide the stem back onto the fork. And then all my spacers and top cap go on top. Oh, and something doesn't want to go. There you go. And this is definitely easier on the ground, because I've got a gap already forming. The thing I want to point out with, and just reassemble that, and the first thing we're going to sort out is the tension on this entire bearing system here with that top cap bolt. So really important here. I twizzle that in, and then I can see that like I've got a gap here, so I know that it's not fully in. Just making sure everything is lined up and fully taking up any gaps in space. And again, tightening that. Tighten the bolt until it just stops naturally. And at this point, you're going to be checking for play and knocking. Play is knocking. Play means you have it's a bit too loose and you've got to tighten up that bolt. But the other thing you're going to check for is grinding. So grinding is when it's too tight and then the bars won't move. So the two things I'm going to do here is, I don't know if I put the bike on the ground at this point. To check for play, I don't know if you can see me, to check for play, I'm going to grab the bars, and my bike would be on the ground at this point, and grab the front brake, and then you move the bike forward and back. And if I'm getting any sort of knocking movement, then that means this bolt needs to get tightened. Another way to check is you grab the fork with one hand and the handlebar with the other, and then move it. Is this moving? It is absolutely moving on its own, side to side. So I need to take off some of that tension. I'm going to give it a quarter turn, and I check it again side to side. So one hand here, one hand on the fork, and move it the way it should not be moving, side to side. Don't worry about the direction just yet if they are in alignment. You're looking for just the play. And that feels okay. I know I have sealed bearings, so I have a little bit more leeway with how tight I make that bolt. Sealed bearings look like, ooh, can I pick this up? I have another frame that I was hiding at the bottom here. So sealed bearings look like this. You see that it's just a silver disc. So loose bearings are not as flexible. You have to be very precise with that tension if you have a loose bearing headset. That's why I also recommend people get sealed bearing headsets, is because they are much more weather resistant, and there's less, they have a higher tolerance for, squishing in of that headset. So once I've got that tension set up, then I tighten these stem bolts on the side. And in this instance, I will, because I have a carbon fork, I'm going to be using a torque wrench. So I wanted to go over quickly how to use a torque wrench. Bike parts usually use a measurement of Newton meters for torque. This is a measurement of pressure applied over distance, which is how we get Newton meters. I don't know what a Newton is, but I also know that you can measure torque in feet-pounds, for example. So it is basically just a standardization for how tight something is or needs to be, just so we're on the same page. So there's me working in the shop, and then there's like a super hench, giant armed mechanic that is going to be able to apply much more force than me. But we still just use a torque wrench, so we're on the same page of applying the same amount. So this is our home torque wrench. You'll see it looks like one of those like eye doctor, or when the doctor checks your ear things. And here on the bottom, you've got a scale, and right now it's all the way off. So let's say I'm doing this up and it actually says maximum 5 Newton meters on my stem. So I know that the max I should go is 5. So I just twizzle this so that that red line starts moving up. And then once you get to where you want it to be, I want it a bit more than 2. So I'm going to bring it up to 4 because it says maximum 5. And then you've got a couple features here. One is there's a ratchet head, and you can change the size of whatever hex or Torx key you might need. And then you can switch the ratchet on into the right position to tighten. When you tighten up a stem, you need to tighten these 2 bolts in equal increments at the same time. Do not tighten one all the way and then tighten the other. That is very bad. You will end up completely throwing off any sort of tension on this. You could potentially crack the clamp itself. So you'll just turn, what I would do is actually I'd start out using the regular Allen key, just tighten it to the point where they look the same, like this is the same distance gap here. And also it's starting to get quite tight. So I need to be really precise at that point. And then I would use the torque wrench to tighten. Make sure it has purchase, it's fitting in. And then as you're turning, oh, do you see that? What happens is there's a hinge here. So at this point, this head, when it reaches the correct torque, it will, I don't know if you hear that. It clicks and you can feel it give, like it doesn't want to turn anymore. And then you're done. And then take the tool out and you do the same on the other side. Again, applying pressure, and there it just went again. So 5 is very low in terms of Newton meter settings. And this, you can also get preset torque wrenches where it's just as 5 and you don't have to worry about this gauge here. So if you have a look at kind of the parts on your bike that might need a torque wrench that are delicate, usually the seat post and the stem bolts are about 5 Newton meters. There are definitely other parts of the bike where you would use a torque wrench, like the left-sided crank on my Holotech bottom crank set takes a torque setting. The 2 pinch bolts take a torque of between 12 and 14 Newton meters, which this would still do. So if you want something that does a variety, you can get one of these that does a range, or you can buy preset torque spanners, torque wrenches. The other thing that's really important to note, if you have one of these, when you are done, unscrew this so it's in the most relaxed position. Right, so mechanic trick, if something's still being worked on and is not set, you offset it wrong. So what I would do is I'm gonna put my bars kind of off to the side. So I know, I'm like, oh, I didn't do the side bolts on this yet. I'm gonna do that later because in the interest of time. Oh, and when you do that, that's when you make sure the bars are aligned with your tire, your wheel. And so you're not riding in a crooked line because it can really throw you off. So moving on, let's put the rear mech back on. This can be fiddly because you need to make sure the bolt is going in straight, so you're not stripping the threads, but also you don't catch the B screw on the lip of the mech hanger. So I'm gonna just show you, this is our mech on the outside. If we turn it around, This screw here is called the B screw, and this screw just changes, it's not really a home mechanic thing, but what it does is it changes the angle of where your derailleur sits. And if you're screwing the mech into the mech hanger here, you'll see that the mech hanger has this little lip. And if you're not paying attention and you just kind of let the mech do what it wants, it will just the B screw will go into that lip and it will destroy the mech hanger. It won't work. So this lip here is designed for the B screw to sit on top of. So you see how I have to rotate the mech to make sure that when I screw this in, it clears that ledge. And once you clear it, you're good. You can let go of the mech, but you have to hold it in position. And I wonder if I can just, if I start this, and so you can see here, oh, I've just undid it. It's just because my bike is a bit further away than I expected. So there we go. So now you can see this, the B screw here is hitting that lip, and you would need to pull the tension off because remember, this has got a chain on it. So what it looks like, what the struggle looks like is this. So I've got my mech. I've got to align the bolt with the mech hanger. So I have to twist the mech back to the side. And here's a point where you have to make really sure that the bolt is going in straight and you're not going in crooked, because if you go in crooked, you destroy the mech hanger. Another good reason to carry a spare mech hanger. And so you line the bolt with the mech. At this point, you just kind of want to get it to catch. And then once it catches, that's when you'll need to definitely move the mech, move the mech back. And I can see the B screw, this little ledge. Oh, you have to pull the mech back. And then you can see it's clearing it. And then tighten that on. And then this is not done up even, it's like hand tight, like hand effort, it stops, you stop. Do not over tighten at this point. You can definitely strip the threads of your mech hanger because remember, it is a soft, brittle metal. But again, a good reason to carry a spare mech hanger. So putting pedals back on. Pedals are sided, remember. One pedal is specific to the drive side or the right side of the bike. The other is specific to the non-drive side of the bike. So check, if you have a look at pedals, you'll see, like, for example, these ones are really clear. They have R there and L there, meaning that's going to go on the right side, that's going to go on the left side of the bike. These similarly have an R and L etched on the side. But mechanic trick, a quick way, and this doesn't happen on all pedals, but on many of them, if you see a pedal that has tick marks, see these splines here, automatically I know that's a left-hand pedal. So if you are rummaging through a parts bin and you're like, I need a right-hand pedal, if you see anyone with these tick mark splines, then you know it's not the one that you want. I'm just checking, got some other pedals here. These are French though, so they're not gonna have it. And if Well, yeah, okay, let's talk about that. In that situation, how would you tell which pedal is right and which is left? Like, this isn't a clipped pedal, so you don't know which way is up or down. And they don't have R or L written anywhere. And in which case, I would start looking at the direction of the threads. So if you have a look at each of these threads here are kind of sloping in that way. And these threads on this side are kind of sloping that way, which tells me this pedal, oh, hang on. I'm looking at this backwards, or the camera's reversed. I can't see. Anyways, whichever way the angle is going up, that is the direction that it tightens in. So if we then, I can see these threads are moving up in that direction. If I kind of just rotate the pedal on the side, that up direction becomes the inward direction, and that is the way that it will tighten. I will turn the pedal in the direction where it's going in. Bit hard to explain, but it's just, hopefully you don't get into the situation where you're like, I don't know which side this pedal is supposed to be going on. Pretty much all modern pedals these days will say if it is right or left. Right. And then the other thing to remember is, remember, pedals, they move together whichever way to tighten and loosen. So the pedals tighten going forward, going towards the front of the bike in the clockwise direction. We're going forward in time. So again, right side pedal, drive side pedal, is going to be righty-tighty. This is the regular typical thread. On the other side of the bike, non-drive side, we're going to turn still in this direction, but if you're facing this way, it's lefty-tighty from this side. So confusing, but there's a few different ways of looking at it. So the most important thing is just remembering right pedal goes on the right side, left pedal goes on the left side. We have too many people come in who are assembling bikes, like box bikes that they've just bought, and it's just not clear enough on the package, or English is a second language, and then they tear into the threads of their crank and destroy the crank. Like this thread, this is like steel alloy, is much stronger than this crank arm. These crank arms are just like mushy aluminium. It is so easy to mash up these threads. So the other thing to remember when you are putting this in is always look at the threads and the direction it's going. You're making sure it's going in straight, it's going in easy, you're not forcing anything. I would recommend putting this in by hand first. You don't want to strip those threads. You will have a bad time. You will have a terrible time if you have to get new cranks wherever you're going. So yeah, that's pedals. And again, if it is difficult, stop immediately. Just you don't want to cross thread. Be patient. Double check you've got the right pedal on the right side. Maybe it is just dirty, but I would, take it out, give it a quick clean. If you see metal shavings, that is absolutely bad. Stop what you're doing. You are cutting new threads and you are stripping the old ones. So metal shavings, bad. Just keep that in mind. You don't want to see those. So right, that is basically reassembly. Give your bike an M check to make sure everything's in order. So then remember, that's checking the bike in the shape of the M. If you didn't get to watch last week's class, I think everyone here is in the library. So just there is an M check video in the library. It's called Keeping Tabs on Your Bike. The other thing to just want to flag up when you're returning, again, is are you departing from the same place that you arrived? And do you have a place to store your packing materials and tools? Easy, but if you're arriving in one place and departing from another, you need to figure out a plan for getting those packing materials there, or where you might get more packing material. Don't be an asshole and like dispose of packing material on the street. Like try to find like an actual place to get rid of them, or I don't know, maybe another bike shop could help. But if, like in my situation, I was lucky at the 6th bike shop I managed to find a box, but if I didn't, I don't think I would have known what to do. Now I know, like, I'd have my plan B, which is get one of these giant, these giant plaid bags. Not a bad idea to, I mean, if you have room to bring this with you, it could be useful. These unfold to become really big, and you'll have to dismantle the bike quite extremely. Like all the wheels have to come off, handlebars have to come off, seat post, pedals, maybe even the fork needs to come out, but you will be able to fit it in the bag. And then you just tell them it's not a bike, it's just parts. So that's a plan B.